you're going to love today's conversation because we are doing something really special and bringing one of our most meaningful conversations from the 2025 Stepmom Summit. Welcome, welcome. So, I want to ask you a couple things. First, are you the only one in the house who knows when all the dentist appointments are, or that your stepson needs cleats for soccer that starts next week, or the one who is mentally tracking what's in the fridge, the gifts you need to buy for all the birthday parties you're taking the kids to this weekend, and maybe even whose week it is with the kids? Yeah, I thought so. Because those invisible mental gymnastics that you're doing every single day, it has a name and it's called the mental load. And research shows that women carry 2/3 or more of what it takes to run a home and family, regardless of whether they work outside the home. And get this, it actually gets worse the more money that women make. Now, layer stepfamily life on top of that. The custody schedules, the gift giving for kids who aren't yours, the emotional choreography around an ex, the unspoken expectation that you should just know how this family works, even though you didn't build it from scratch. No wonder you're exhausted. So today I'm bringing you something a little different. One of the most powerful conversations from the 2025 Stepmom Summit. It's my interview with Eve Rodsky. If you don't know Eve, she's the New York Times bestselling author of Fair Play and Find Your Unicorn Space. And she's leading a global movement to help women reclaim their time, energy, and joy. She's Harvard trained in organizational management, and she argues that the patriarchy is systematically devaluing women's unpaid domestic labor by treating men's time as finite and valuable while treating our time as infinite and free. Her work aims to dismantle this dynamic by teaching couples to equitably divide household responsibilities. So I'm so excited to share this with you because Eve is someone who really gets it. She doesn't sugarcoat stuff. She names all the things that are stacked against us, and then she gives us a real path forward. And we go into all of that in this conversation. You're going to hear about Eve's movement, and we're going to dig into her fair play method and how to find our unicorn space. And we talk about something I think you probably really need to hear right now, which is the actual antidote to burnout. And spoiler alert, it's not a bubble bath. So settle in. Here is my conversation with Eve Rodsky. Eve, welcome. I am so excited to have you here.
Thank you, Cameron, for having me.
And we have already got the chat fired up, so that is wonderful. And Eve, I see that you said would love to know
If
the
anybody, wants to
age of
let
your
me know the
stepchildren.
age, I think that we can tailor the conversation for age,
Yes,
but,
I love that.
there's different, data that we have based on different life cycles.
I love that. And for the folks that are here that know me, that you know that I love working off of data and having a very evidence-based approach. So I
Mhm.
think that is fabulous. So we've got some folks popping in the chat
Great.
with the ages. We are, and for our attendees, this is going to be a very free-flowing conversation like we've been doing. I'm going to ask some questions. We're going to go into the chat. So you guys have questions, throw it in the chat, and we will kind of just talk it out. So let's get started. So Eve, the blueberry breakdown. Um, I think it's a fabulous example of why you're doing this work, but tell anybody that may not be familiar with that. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and I think, for those in the community that are remarried, maybe unpaid labor was part of the reason you got divorced in the first place, but, that was almost my road. Ironically, it's my 20-year anniversary today, and that isn't, what
Oh,
happened to us. Yes, but it could have easily because, in 2011, after I had my second son, Ben, uh, as you called it, blueberries breakdown, my husband, Seth, sent me a text that said, "I'm surprised you didn't get blueberries." And I still have that screenshot text. "I'm surprised you didn't get blueberries" was something that, really changed my life because I want you to picture the scene, Cameron. I, received Seth's text right after I had my second son, Ben. So I had a 3-year-old and a newborn, and I was racing to a toddler transition program for that, 3-year-old, which in America, it costs all of our salaries, and those programs last like 1 hour. And I was trying to cram everything into that time for my family. And also, I had a breast pump and a diaper bag on the passenger seat of my car. I had gifts to return in the back seat of my car. I was trying to keep my career afloat, so I remember I had a client contract in my on my lap, and amidst all this chaos, Seth sends me that text, and I pulled over. I just started to sob, and I think what I wish I could tell myself in 2011, I could tell all of you, right, is that it wasn't a personal failing, that I was blaming myself that day, but I wish I could tell everybody and warn them that women shoulder 2/3 or more of what it takes to run a home and family, and that doesn't mean it has to be biological kids.
Yep.
It's, patriarchal assumptions, and we'll talk about that. And so I wish I had known that. Even if I knew that stat, Cameron, that women shoulder 2/3 or more of what it takes to run a home and family, regardless of whether they work outside the home, and that it gets worse the more money women make. If I had known that, I think I would have maybe given myself some more grace that day.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
I want folks to pop in the chat because when I first read this anecdote and how you got into the work, I just sort of exhaled because I was like, oh my God, have we
Yeah.
not all been there? Like where you're as a woman, you're balancing the world on your shoulders every single day, right? And as a
Every
stepmom,
day.
we're putting even more pressure on ourselves because we feel like we've got to be like extra perfect and prove our place in the family and pay the
Yes,
way stuff to
yes.
be there, you know? Why?
And
Why do we
I
do
will
this?
say, well, the other thing I wanna just say about that is, without really understanding what happens to women, then we just what else do we have? What is the alternative to change? The alternative to change is just that we do things as we've always done them. And we usually default back to what we know, right? Which is that women, are, the shefault, as I call it, not just the default, but we're the shefault. And I remember, my mother, she was a single mom raising me, and I have a wonderful stepmother. And she would tell me that when my father married my stepmother at 10, um, she could exhale because she knew for the first time I'd be wearing clean underwear when I went, on his custody weekends. She knew that I would be bringing a gift to a birthday party.
Yeah.
And so all of that labor transferred over to Marcia, my wonderful stepmother. And of course, I love her. We have a wonderful relationship, but that's not the way it should have been, right? My father should have been a co-parent, but that's not how it practically worked out.
Mhm.
And so I think these default assumptions are really, really ingrained. And so, Cameron, we'll sort of talk about, you know, why they're ingrained, and then we could always talk about, of course, the solutions. But I really think it's important to know that none of this is any of our fault. This is none of our fault. This is people who, in my marriage, like I said, I had a single mother. I came from a blended family. I vowed to have an equal partner in my home, and I end up cut to uh, my second son being born in 2011, and I'm crying on the side of the road. So
Yeah,
even with the
totally.
best of intentions, it usually doesn't work out.
But I so appreciate that you said it's not your fault because that is
Yes,
such an important point, and I always underscore that with my stepmoms that, like, you feel like you're failing. You feel like, you've got, like I said, the weight of the world on you, and you feel like you can't take care of it and you're overwhelmed, and it's not your fault. It's a structural issue. In our case with step families and the way that they are set up, you're kind of set up to fail. But
correct.
in the case of general mental load, it's a societal structural issue.
Oh yeah. So, and I think we have a lot of blended families in Fair Play. So the good news is that we're fighting on both fronts, Cameron. There's a structural solution, right, which is um, sort of combating patriotic notions of what women need to do in society, helping fathers get paternity leave, really sort of changing the paid leave structures, fighting for flexible work schedules, and not all these return to office mandates. But there's really personal work that we can all do on our burnout. And I think that's why we're here today to really understand what burnout is, which we can talk about, but also to work on the secret formula for how you can look at burnout. It doesn't mean that the secret formula is going to be implemented today, Cameron. But I think after doing this now Wow, I mean, since 2011, it's been a really long time. So I have over a decade of data. Let's just say that there is a secret formula, and it's a lifetime of work. But we'll really talk about that and sort of unpack each piece of that. And that secret formula that will combat burnout is boundaries, systems, and communication.
Love it.
And those are the three things. And I want to just start with the boundaries because I think it's very important. The system is fair play. I designed a system. We'll talk about that, how helpful it can be in the family. Why wasn't this already in process? Why hadn't somebody else in organizational management, I'm not that smart, come up with a system to help rebalance your home? Because I found out of boundaries. Because that system in a workplace, Cameron, even my Aunt Marion's Mahjong group has more clearly defined expectations in the home. If you don't bring snack twice to that group, you're out. Whereas in the home, literally, I have systems manager telling me that they're deciding who's taking the dog out right when it's about to take a piss on the rug. So let's just say we have 0 systems, but no one came up with this idea or no one could implement it because it was a boundaries issue. So what do I mean by that? Well, this woman said to me, which I love so much, she said to me, what fair play taught her was that she didn't have a magical vagina. She didn't actually have a magical vagina that whispered in her ear what her husband's mother wanted for Christmas. That's the boundary. There's no such thing as magical vaginas. This is work, and it's work that is unpaid, and it falls on women because society doesn't value it. So let's just say that's what it is. And because it's so painful to live in a society where we don't value that work, we become complicit in our own oppression.
Mm.
Not blaming us. It's just it's easier to be complicit in our own oppression. So what do I mean by that? Well, in a society where you can't hold a boundary when you've been told since birth that your time is worthless like sand, but a man's time is finite like a diamond. We're taught that since we're born. Women over index on the chore gap, no matter what family structure you live in. We know that when women enter male professions, the salaries go down. We're,
Mhm.
we're taught, we still in 2025, I literally walk into hospitals and see signs that say breastfeeding is free when it's an 1,800 hour a year job. So we just devalue women's work everywhere you look. But the problem is, it's hard to hold a boundary when that's how you've been raised. All of us have been raised that way. We've all been
Yeah.
defined by a role. And so then what ends up happening is we use for reasons that we end up in situations that maybe feel rageful to us. We say to ourselves, well, I entered a relationship where my partner makes more money than me. Or in this arrangement, my job is more flexible. Or in the time it would take me to tell John what to do, I should do it myself. Or I'm wired differently for care, even if it's not my biological kids. I'm still differently for care because I know how to do this and my partner doesn't. Or we're both colorectal surgeons and my partner is better at focusing on one task at a time and I can find the time. We're just not we're, but that doesn't matter if your job is more flexible or in the time it takes you to do it or whether someone makes more money than you because as I said to you earlier, it doesn't get better when women make more money. This is just us being conditioned to say my time is going to be in service to you. And that's what a patriarchy does. A patriarchy forces women to breach their boundary to spend all of their waking hours in service of somebody else. And now in a late stage capitalist patriarchy, you're only allowed to be 3 things. You can be a parent and you can be a partner, but you also have to be a professional because we can't live on one salary anymore. There's an eroding middle class. So now we need women's professional contributions. So we'll welcome them into the workforce, but we will never ever allow men to be the primary caregivers. So it just ends up in a very, very burnout cycle. And so that's important to talk about first because we'll talk about systems of communication, which are the key to start moving out of it. But again, I want us to all realize that this work deserves a trigger warning because it took me years of working on myself to finally be able to have the courage to say to Seth, not I need you to take the fucking garbage out and put the liner back in, which is really what the system does. But for me to say, "Hey, Seth, yes, you make more money than me. Yes, my job's more flexible, but what I notice is that I'm doing things in service of the home all day, every day, you get 3 hours after our kids go to bed to finish sports center, workout, finish a PowerPoint deck, where I do things in service of the home till my head hits the pillow 2 hours after you're already sleeping. And I'm just not gonna live that way anymore. And that's the boundary. But that's why we need communities like you, Cameron, because it's very hard to do on your own. Very, very hard.
Very hard. So how did that first conversation go with Seth when you had to set the boundary?
Well, it
Was
wasn't a
he like, "What the
conversation.
hell?"
No, no, there's no conversations because, we're not taught to ask for what we need. So let's just I'll give you an example. During the pandemic, my favorite thing is, online conversations about unpaid labor. It's when Fair Play blew up because I'd been talking for years about the fact that the home is an organization and it's actually not that blurred from workplaces and then all of a sudden our homes were in
That's
everybody's lives and it changed. And so I think for me, like when the pandemic happened, I think um it was very eye-opening to basically understand and to say, um, I needed to say something, and I started to see other women who were saying things to me like, "I don't communicate about domestic life." But then this one woman who said that to me said every time her husband forgets to put the clothes in the dryer in the pandemic, she was dumping, the clothes on his pillow. So, there was another Facebook group, like I said, during the pandemic that I loved that was called "The Reasons I Hate My Husband and Kids During COVID." And this one woman wrote, "If my husband dies during COVID, it won't be because of the disease. It'll be because of me." So I reached out to her on DM because I thought that was sort of interesting and funny. And I said, "Well, how do you communicate about domestic life?" And she said, "I don't. This is my safe space." So let's just reflect on the fact that we not only are we breaching our boundaries, but we don't communicate what we need. And again, I get it. But it's just interesting to think about the fact that this woman felt that publicly threatening to murder her partner in front of 23,000 strangers
was
felt
safe.
safer to her than saying to a partner, "I can't live like this anymore.
Wow.
I need you to take on unpaid labor," right? Because there's always gonna be we're waiting for that pushback. "Well, I don't make the money. I got into this arrangement. I chose this." We just already have all these toxic messages, um, and so it just men are taught again to guard their time. So they'll be very defensive about these issues. Then we'll get very loud and then we'll get avoidant behavior. So that's why I ask women first before you even look at the system because the system is there for you. It will always be there for you. It is 100 cards. I break it down for you. I can tell you the ones that really bother step parents the most. We'll talk about that. But the thing that we could do in community,
Right.
the thing we can do in community is, work on those boundaries together. I think Erica just said, right? When I attempt to communicate, he just pisses me off and I want to shank him sometimes. Absolutely. It's so painful when we don't know how to communicate these things. And so it just becomes almost better not to communicate because it just ends up in a cycle of just um, disappointment for a lot of women. And so that's why most of my work initially, again, keeping the policy stuff aside, in the home, my first work is to ask women who live in a patriarchy to work in communities like this to reestablish their boundaries. That's the first thing. And then we can, again, and then I give a lot of tips, but the most important tip for communication is that, yeah. So I statements, let me just talk about I statements. When someone told me to use the I statement, I started using those, Erica, and this is how I would say them. "I fucking hate you, Seth." That was my I statement. So I statements can go flush themselves down the fucking toilet. Traditional couples therapists can go throw themselves down the toilet. Family mediators can go throw themselves down the toilet because they're all also perpetuating patriarchy. If you're a fair play facilitator, we have an amazing nonprofit that works on therapists who are fair play certified. Then I would say, yes, they understand. Um, I'm so okay communicating what I need. I communicate differently than my partner does. And yes. So let's stop here and talk a little about communication. So, Cameron, I surveyed over 1,000 people on social media. and I asked them what their most important practice was. Some people didn't understand the question, but most responses were things like meditation, exercise, drinking with friends. We got a lot of funny ones. But there's not one person in that thousand that said communication was their most important practice.
Wow.
So, and again, not that they would, because no one looks at communication as a practice. I did that almost on purpose. I was really hoping nobody would say communication, and they didn't, because people don't look at communication as a practice, Cameron. They look at it as a means to an end. I said this, it didn't fucking work. I'm not doing it again. Or I don't know how to communicate because my partner is X. So it's very a frustrating process. However, if we look at it like you're learning to do a cartwheel, I was watching my daughter do a front flip and I was like, wow, she fell on her face, I don't know, 99 times before she got the front flip. Um,
Just keep
we
going, nothing.
we don't fall on our face 99 times. We say we don't communicate about domestic life or we stop communicating. But as I said to you earlier about the woman who dumps her clothes on the pillow, what I'm here to say to everybody here is that you are already communicating about domestic life. You are communicating about domestic life. All of us communicate about domestic. I can go on your Nest Cam, Cameron, and see 10 ways you communicated about domestic life today. I wouldn't even need to have your audio on. And so, what I'm here to tell you is that, look, after 15 years, one of my great pieces of advice is if we can't establish boundary systems of communication, I'm all for actually exiting the relationship. I used to not say that, but I've seen many, many people who now use fair play in a co-parenting situation, and it's a great, great thing. But if you want to stay in the relationship, I would say that the best thing we can do, and we'll talk again, is to keep practicing those boundaries, and we'll talk more about that. But the first thing we can do is start to set up a communication practice. It is, if you could take one thing away from today, it's that communication, again, the I statements, all that, it's such bullshit. The only thing that matters about communication is two things. One, that it's a practice. And again, this is from years and years, not only as a mediator and a lawyer who deal with communication, but also now having all the fair play data. The things that work for families are just two things. One, that they understand communication is a practice. And two, they understand that they need to communicate when emotion is low and cognition is high. That's it. The most important practice that people come back to me to say has been really helpful for fair play is that they learn not to give feedback at the moment.
Which is huge
It's
and
so
hard
hard.
to do. So
God, it is so hard. It is my biggest, I'd say it's like I'm Odysseus on a lifelong journey, Cameron, and my journey is to not give feedback in the moment. Um, so it has to be fixed immediately, as you said, Cassidy. And if it's not, it feels like it'll never come up again. And so the biggest practice I've had is I have a communication notebook. It's in my Evernote, which is on my phone. And I just write um, everything in there. So again, Erica wants examples. So sand on the floor when my partner would take, when Seth would take the kids to the beach and come home, dump sand all over the floor. My feedback at the moment would be like, what the fuck is this? Who leaves sand all over the floor? Go clean up the sand before you come back in the house. That's feedback. Um, it would be a million things like that. Why? Seth, get them on the homework now. They have a tutor. So just lots of bad tone, really loud. I get very, very loud. I like to screen. And so and then the person becomes avoidant. Um, and it just, this horrible cycle that continues on and on. So what I really like to do is to understand and practice when that comes up. So now I'll have, again, back to the practice. When you have something, and again, you can say, look, I learned from this mediator that one of the successful longevity tactics for marriage is check-ins. So if you're long-winded, if that's your communication vulnerability, I just told you mine is tone, it's very important that, and I talk about this in Fair Play, I even have a quiz, and I'm sure Cameron can bring it up for anybody after who wants it, but to know your vulnerability, because then it becomes more fun. You can start with your partner saying 2 things. I really wanna start a check-in, but before we do that, we need to know our vulnerabilities so they don't take over the check-in. So if your vulnerability is long-windedness, you're gonna wanna set a timer. If your vulnerability is tone, like mine is, then it has to be a time when cognition is very high and emotion is very low. If your vulnerability is avoidance, you actually have to show up at the check-in. A lot of men will see that appointment and just delete or decline, and that's very frustrating for people who are not avoidant and their
Mhm.
partner is avoidant. So it's really important to know those vulnerabilities, and it's and because it's a practice, we both understand that, just like exercise or I don't know, whatever other practice you do, eating healthy or meditation, you may be great at it for 3 weeks and then you just completely fall off.
Yeah.
And that's really, and so, but part of the boundary, Erica, is holding what your boundary is. Like, your boundary may not be that everything has to be perfect, but your boundary is that you're showing up on Sundays at 1 for that meeting. Like, that's your boundary. And if that doesn't happen, then I'm a game changer. Something in this relationship is going to have to change. At some point, we have to set a boundary, and it can be anything. For me, it was starting with communication. It was very important for me. And I always joke why it worked so well was because Seth is the type of man where in the moment, literally I could have a severed leg and ask him for Tylenol and he'd be like, "Nope." But if I in a check-in, if I say to Seth, I really my why is that I get headaches, at night, and I wanna make sure that I, really am present for you and the kids, and so I need Tylenol beside my bed every night for the rest of our lives at 8 p.m. There will be Tylenol there for the rest of my life at 8 p.m. That's just what happens, that's just how it works, but in the moment, it would never happen. So, um I think we have to know ourselves and our partners, but I would say there's just those 2 things that over a decade of following families we've seen work. One, that they're willing to treat communication, like I said, as a practice, and 2, that they understand that communicating when emotion is low and cognition is high is one of the best things that we can do in terms of investing in our relationships.
That's huge. And being able to, I mean, I think that this practice of regular communication, one of the things we talk about a lot
Yeah.
is the fact that when you're in a step family, so many things feel like they supersede your relationship, right? Like there's
Yeah.
some crisis with the kids or, some drama with the ex or whatever that
Yep,
looks like.
yep.
If you have this practice of communication, it also can serve as a regular way to sort of come back together, even
Of
if
course.
you're having hard conversations, because, it's, people are always like, well, I can't get a date night because, the kids are this. Well, work on your regular communication, then that stuff will follow, right? So I love that really fits perfectly in to the guidance that we work through with step families.
Yeah, and I will say, like, Cassie just asked a question. So what I would say is that, um Cassidy, what I've learned, and you can say this is from, again, a researcher who whatever your partner needs, give 'em my Harvard background, the fact that I've been a lawyer for 20 years, that I've been in organizational management for my whole life, but the home is an organization, and organizations fail when you don't have structured communication. It's just what it is. There's only 2 things an organization needs to succeed, and again, we know this from years and years and years of organizational management, and the gurus in the field. Organizations need 2 things to succeed. They need accountability and trust, and there's 0 way to build accountability and trust without communication. So that's what I would say, is that the home is an organization, and, it's a system, it's an organization, and so you can live in a place where communication flows, but unfortunately, that will lead to the erosion of accountability and trust, because it'll mean that communication is happening in the moment. So what I would say is that, well, typically when it's flowing sort of negatively when we're snapping at each other in the moment. And or I notice in the past month that this is how we've been communicating. And so, yeah, that's flowing, but it's not flowing efficiently. It's not flowing in the best way possible to make this organization thrive. What if we tried both? It can flow, but also for things that aren't appropriate in the moment. And there's many times in step families where they're not appropriate in the moment because you're not going to want to talk about these issues possibly in front of your stepkids or in front of the ex who may be there at the game. And, there's just a lot of times where things come up where just given the complexities of a blended family, you're not going to necessarily want to bring that up. And so you can say, just given how many constituents are in our family, and how complicated it is, there needs to be a time where you and I can talk privately when our emotions are low and our cognition is high. And so that's sort of how I would say it. And any man or any person who's ever worked in any sort of organization, even, a McDonald's fast food, right? If you're on the fry station and you start like giving out like McFlurries, like the whole fucking thing is going to fall down, like we have to have some version of systems. And again, for blended families, it's actually really, really important because there's so many things that are being thrown at you. So I would position it more as a privacy thing where look, where there's so many constituents in our marriage, we have stepkids, we have exes, we need some private time to have conversations where we're not talking about these things in front of your kids or my kids.
I think you could also make it fun, right? Like, I've got some friends who do
Totally fun.
a weekly board meeting, and it's like their Sunday breakfast with orange juice and pancakes, and like that's
Yes.
their time together. And they go over schedules and they do, things. And
Yes.
they're both CEOs. So, like, they have crazy schedules, but like that's the time that they come together
Yep.
and have it. And it's sort of a nice little ritual, like a weekly thing, So that could be
Yep.
fun,
We call
especially
it
if your spouse is like corporate minded.
totally. We call it short-term reward substitution. There's an economic concept where hard conversations that are done with short-term rewards happen and more frequently than not. So, like, you try a new wine when you try a new wine when you have this conversation. You're opening a new box of chocolates. Like you have some sort of fun ritual that go along with the conversation. And that usually helps a lot.
I love that. So what are we missing from this discussion? Because I do want to move on. I want to talk about the unicorn space and finding joy also, but I don't want to leave this behind without making sure that we covered everything that you wanted to
Yes,
cover.
yes. I think the last thing I would just say, we've spent a lot of time on boundaries. We spent a lot of time on communication, but I think to understand the fair play system is really helpful. And again, we won't go into all the 100 cards now, but I will say that depending on the type of cards, um, there are some that are just frustrations from a normal, you know, day, like a normal day. I mean, nothing's normal when you have kids, but let's just say, there's typical frustrations like laundry, or there's frustrations about keeping, dishes in the sink. So I'd say like those are regular frustrations, the but for blended families, for step families, there are certain things where the value system in your home is not the same as the value system in the home of the other co-parent,
Yes,
if
that
there
is
is one. And I think that that's very, very important to get your head around
hmm
because those are the ones that I tell step parents like step out of.
yeah.
Like, if in your home you want the kids to do homework and the other parent homework is never done, again, that's gonna have to be a situation where that's not where you're gonna be involved. Or, spirituality, your family wants to have a baptism, a bar mitzvah, whatever, and that person's not gonna pay for it. Or, so there are these cards in the fair play system where we see again, the normal day frustrations, we call those the daily grinds, but there are other ones, where there's a values misalignment with the co-parent, where I'd say that those are really, really tricky ones. And again, we can always, sort of highlight those for you all, but you'll see them in the system. Like if you look at the fair play cards, or in the book, you'll see the cards and you'll know which ones those are. Typically, they're around spirituality, they're around school school transition, like whether or not you want to pay for a private school for that child and the co-parent doesn't, moving them into a better school district. Like there's some things that are bigger and beyond you that I always say like is maybe not the best places for a step parent to have to like die on the sword for.
Anita has a great question here. How do you navigate around the notion that I am free to have my system? My spouse will respect it, but the stepsons do not have to be involved at all, even though they're here full time.
Yeah. I think the there's no such thing as getting kids involved without the parents being on the same page. Let's just say that. I that there I we've never seen in 15 years where a kid will just be like, "You know what? I'm taking over laundry today." It doesn't happen.
I
Um,
wish.
it has to be modeled by the parents. And so once that gets modeled, there's a lot more things that can be done. But I think the best important thing is that you start to have those conversations, right? Um, the expectations conversations come with the system.
Huge.
So, like I said, the boundaries is you being like, "I'll never fucking touch my stepson's underwear as long as they live in this house. I will never do their laundry." Right? The boundaries come from you, but the communication will is what we talked about. We'll start building your organization into a successful one, but the real who does what, the expectations of a home, that's all the fair play system. And ironically, that's the easiest part. But it requires getting over these boundaries and communication hurdles. So that's why I say it's not for you to handle all at once, but just know none of this is your fault. All these assumptions, default assumptions, frustrations, they're all built into patriarchy. So, like, I think first just understanding that this community is for you. We're here to introduce these concepts to you, and that they're a lifelong practice, that may feel good or bad. But what I'm here to say is, like, again, we're all here to support everybody. But yes, there's no kids stepping up to the plate, especially in a double home situation or triple home situation or a quadruple home situation where they just magically start, adopting their own independence. I mean, sometimes maybe if you're a woman, like I did that, I helped my mom pay her bills starting at 8. So I was a people pleasing firstborn daughter. So maybe if you have a firstborn stepdaughter, there's a possibility for it. But typically with young or teenage boys, it requires a man to model that first.
Cassidy has a question about where to find the cards. And
Oh,
Cassidy,
yes, yes.
I got mine on Amazon, and they're fantastic. They do come with instructions, although having the book is definitely handy to like go into more depth. But
Totally, totally.
Eve, they are your cards, so I will let you talk about the.
Oh, yeah, well, we also have, like again, you can always buy them on Amazon or wherever, but we also have, like, a lot of free resources too. We're a nonprofit, so we wanna make it very accessible. So you can just go to fairplaypolicy.org, and you can find everything there. You can find the cards, you can find if you click on each card, it'll give you the conception, planning, and execution for each card, what it means to own a card. That's the core tenet of fair play. It doesn't have to be 50-50. Your partner doesn't have to have 50 cards, and you don't have to have 50 cards. But if your partner holds a card, they have to own it from start to finish. So if you're doing laundry, it's not I'm gonna help you unload and fold. It's that, as my son says, I'm in charge of the secret oils, which is the laundry detergent, all the way to I have to set a timer to remind myself to take it out of the laundry and put in the dryer. I have to sort it out. Like my black favorite, aloe yoga pants got like ruined because I put them in with my white t-shirts. Yeah, I'm not buying any more pants. Like you learn your lesson. Now you have gray t-shirts. And I have to set another timer to take it out of the dryer, put it in the dryer, and then I have to set another timer to take it out of the dryer. Then I have to fold all of it up and put it away. Um, so that's ownership, right? And so it's that those are the first things you're gonna be discussing, like, "What do you think it means to own this?" And again, not on you, I'm saying with your partner. And again, it's not your responsibility to come in and try to impose, um, these this on everybody else. That's where in a step family, again, the boundary, that's why I spend so much time on boundaries. Like, what you're not gonna do to me is more important than what you do. The system is great. Like I said, it'll always be there for you. But I'm here to more explain like what you shouldn't be doing. That your time is diamonds. You deserve a permission to be unavailable from your roles. Like that's what I want you to understand. Like so the boundaries is the hard part. The system, like I said, will always be there for you. And so is the communication, all the communication techniques are also in the book.
Yeah, it's really gold because you have to, I mean, I guarantee if you came home with a set of cards and sent to your spouse, "Hey, we're gonna do these cards, and I'm gonna give you these, and I'm gonna take these, and we're gonna stick by them." Your spouse would be like, "What are you talking about? I'm not
Yeah.
playing some card game for
Mhm. It,
chores."
it does. It doesn't work. It doesn't work like that.
So
No.
you have to you're right, you've got to have these conversations. That is a hugely important part.
Boundaries, communication, then the systems come into place. I
Mhm.
used to wish it was the opposite because, like I said to you, Aunt Marion's mahjong group, you come up with expectations, right? You
Rules are
block
clear.
twice, you're out, right?
Yeah.
Like Cassidy, I'm working for you, and I say, "Hey, Cassidy, what should I be doing today? I'm just going to wait here till you tell me what to do." I mean, I assume you'd fire me, right? But the home we allow this, it just it makes no sense. Um, so it's going to be these are the important things. This is why you have the community here. It's why I want to talk to you because I think blended families have it the hardest. I think stepmothers have it the hardest because you have unpaid labor obligations and they're not even your biological kids and there's a co-parent that set that value system up probably earlier than you got involved unless like my stepmother you were there sort of from the beginning but most people are not like that they're coming in with a co-parent and a value system that you were isn't yours. And so it's extra hard because the patriarchy plus the chaos of the two organizations trying to merge, or more than two, if you have two step parents, is very, very, very complicated.
And the chaos is real. I mean, I'm reading the comments here, and Erica has made a couple, and it
Oh
sounds like
yeah,
just overwhelm, right? Like
overwhelmed. Oh
stepmoms
my god.
are
Yes,
overwhelmed,
yes, it's very
and
painful.
the mental load issue is, as you said, it's just so much more acute with stepmoms because there are all these expectations. Not to mention that they come into it with their own expectations that aren't met, and it's really challenging. So, I mean, this
Oh my
guidance
god, yes.
is
And I'm seeing here, like, even Mariel, like really? Like, that is not your responsibility to communicate with a neighbor about what's happening with your stepkids, right? I mean, it's mind-blowing to me that we are all in this situation where, again, these assumptions, and it is you know, a vagina replacing a vagina situation here, and that's where patriarchy comes in. That's where, like I said, it's not your fault. It's not your partner's fault. But and I really believe this. I mean, fair play has become a love letter to men. It's not their fault. It's just that, I mean, since birth, if I was guarding my time and then someone tried to like in- infringe on it, like I would not really understand that letting it go didn't mean that we would lose our condo. But I would think letting it go just meant someone else would handle it, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Like that's what men tell me. Oh, yeah, I didn't communicate with the HOA because not necessarily that I thought Muriel would do it, but I just thought it would get done. Like that's what happens when your time is protected your whole
Yeah.
life. That's how a man walks around in the society. And they also walk around with zero guilt and shame, which is so crazy to me. Like the fact that I asked hundreds of men this question if they were supposed to get home. They told their children that they were coming home from a work trip and their plane was delayed and they couldn't get home that day. They had to spend a night in a hotel. Would they feel guilt and shame? Um, Men didn't even understand the question, Cameron.
I think that's so
They're like,
true.
"Oh, because my wife's gonna be mad at me?" I said, "No, no, no. Do you feel
Yeah.
guilt and shame? Why? Because a plane got delayed? Like, they didn't like, what are you talking about?" So, I mean,
It is funny, and it's sometimes the strangest things that really demonstrate this. I mean, in my case with my husband, it's gifts, right? Like, I came in and from the get-go, did every gift for every member of.
what did I just say? I just said that was the first thing my mother felt relief on was I was gonna start bringing gifts to birthday
Yes.
party.
And it didn't occur to me that that wasn't, like, my job, right? And same thing, like, I'm a lawyer and had a very successful career for 20 plus years, and here I am, like, trying to guess what in-laws like and kids and all
Nope,
this stuff.
nope.
And
That's where fair play will help you.
it
That's where
was
the system is
it was
helpful.
it was huge, and it it was, like, one of our first really big fights a couple of years in. I mean, we had had fights, but, like, one of
Yeah,
the big ones.
yes.
And I said, "What did we get your mom for Christmas last year? What about the kids? What did we get them for Christmas? You don't know. Why don't you know?" "Because I'm doing all of it. I'm
Mhm.
wrapping them." I'm like, "It's as big of a surprise on Christmas morning to you as it is."
You, yep, yep. That's one of my favorite SNL skit is with Kristen Wiig, where
Oh,
"I
that one's
got a
so good.
train. I got a new Nintendo. I got a robe.
Yeah, that's
I
such a
love
good
my
one.
robe. Yes, I'll wear my robe." I mean, and so it's just it's again, I think what's important, like you said, Cameron, is to end on a positive note. And the positive note here is that there is a even if you didn't do any of the communication I said, even if you didn't do the system, if you know the definition of mental health, which is what my second book's about, I talk about this and explore this in my first book, but it's really important for women. If I can just tell you that working on those boundaries we talked about is the key to your mental health, then we're walking away with a practice that is doesn't it doesn't involve your stepkids, the birth mom, your husband, it's you. And so I want to just tell you that this may again be helpful or not, but it's the truth. I can't give you a magic pill that says, you can take these edibles and it'll get you. Yes, you can do that and numb yourself through life. But I'm here to tell you that the true antidote to burnout is really just one thing, and that is being consistently interested in your own life. I learned that, Cameron, after a lot of research. The antidote to burnout is being consistently interested in your own life. And so that's why my second book is called Unicorn Space, because that space to be interested in your own life is a fucking magical unicorn that doesn't exist. It actually is a mythical being that does not exist unless you reclaim it. And that reclaiming is a boundary. That's a true boundary. Of course, the boundary is I'm not going to do XYZ or saying to Seth, I'm not going to live like this anymore. But the real boundary is why? Why am I not going to live like this anymore? I'm not going to live like this anymore because I'm going to be a trapeze artist. I'm practicing trapeze. It's very important to me. It may not be important to you. It's going to make you uncomfortable. It's going to make your kids uncomfortable because I'm not here on your custody weekends, but I'm practicing trapeze. I want you to have your time, and you may already have your unicorn space, but the girls' trip once every 2 years is friendship time. It's not enough. Being consistently interested in my own life is a boundary I'm going to set. And it's the consistency, Cameron, that makes it so hard.
Mhm.
Of course, we're interested in our own lives, but being consistently interested in your own life is what's hard for people. It's triggering because that requires time. And again, as I said earlier, what the real true patriarchal erosion of boundaries is making women be in service of other people. And that's how they control women's time. So the more we have to push back on that, the better. But that's probably the hardest part of why, again, fair play has become a movement and not just an organizational system, because it's the movement for women to reclaim their time, which is exactly the opposite of what every single church, every single religion, and every single politician who's male and has a stay at home wife really wants for us. So you have to push back really, really, really hard. And for me this year, it was a physical challenge, which I've never done before. I pick a new unicorn space like every year. This
You
was
just did it recently, right?
yes, I
Yes.
climbed I did the equivalent of Everest. Basically, it was a challenge to climb 29,000 feet, which is um, basically to do a mountain. Of course, it was like 70% tech bros, and then no women with young kids. But it was really wonderful to start training. It was right after my dad died. I wanted something to process my grief, so I had a really big why. That's important to have a why because you want it to be something meaningful to you. You may not know what it is, but you can pick something and then it becomes meaningful to you. And that's sort of what this race became. It was this random amorphous idea to hike Whistler Mountain, which is a 30% incline 8 times. And that's what I did. But I didn't finish it. That's the other thing I want to tell everybody. Completion is not perfection. And but starting and holding a boundary for these training hikes was really, really uncomfortable for my family.
Yeah. I love that, and as someone I've not done that level of hiking, but I have done Kilimanjaro, and that was when you can do something like that, that taxes you physically, that really pushes you to the limits, it is life-changing, and
It really is.
it it really does change the way that you look at what you can do, yeah, I love it. I was watching your journey
Oh,
on
thank you. It was really fun
love it.
and hard, and I think the beauty the thing I want to leave you with, so I know we're coming to the end of our time, is that you all deserve the ability to say, "I can't believe I just did that." Like, if there's just one thing I can leave you with, it's that. There's a gift of being able to say, "I can't believe I just did that," and I'm not sure what it's gonna be for you, but when you have that thing to work towards where you're like, "I can't believe I just did that," then you want more time for that thing, and then it's easier to set a boundary, and then it becomes this really, really healthy cycle, where you wanna implement more systems, where you're willing to have more hard conversations because you want that time back. So that's what I would say. If these conversations feel triggering to you, start with unicorn space. Start with thinking about what does that protected time look like for you, where you get to have that time to start thinking about what it looks like to have an experience where you say to yourself, "I can't believe I just did that."
I love that, and I wanna see in the chat who else is feeling super inspired right now, because I
Mhm.
feel like I'm gonna go finish my book, I'm gonna finish all of my projects,
Yes.
I'm gonna
Yes.
go climb a mountain, like, this is amazing, Eve. Thank you so, so very much for joining us, and yes, I am seeing lots of, like, "Me too"
Thank you all. No, really,
advice.
I appreciate you all. Again, we see you. This is just a one-on-one conversation. Just remember that. There's a lot of concepts here to think about, but all what I would say is just pick one, pick one. Boundary systems, communication. Just pick one this year that you feel you can work on, and
Yeah,
we're here for you.
I love that. It's all a process, it takes time, and you're right,
Yay!
it's small, I
Yes,
love
we
it.
have a children's picture book. So again, let this community be your accountability partner. Uh,
Yes, I love it.
and we will watch it. Yes.
Love it. Eve, thank you so much for everybody. This was amazing. Thank you, Eve.
Thank you so
So
much. All right. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.